In this video, we're going to dive into some of my very favorite drawing hacks, and these are actual tips, tricks, techniques that feel like drawing magic. I've collected these over several decades of drawing almost every day, and I'm excited to share them with you now. Now, this first hack is an easy way to get a perfectly straight vertical or horizontal line. Now, if you have a ruler or you're looking for a ruler, I really recommend this stainless steel ruler. I like it that it has a cork back. It doesn't wiggle around as much, and having this stainless steel means that it won't get cut by an X-Acto blade, so really versatile. But if you don't have one, you can place your pinky. See how I'm just like tapping the edge with that pinky? You're going to use that as kind of your straight edge, and you're going to lock your hand. So you're not going to move your fingers like that. You're going to move your whole arm and hand up and down, keeping your pinky on the edge of the paper in order to use that as a guide. So you'll want to kind of dial your hand in, lock in place, and drag down. This is especially helpful for architecture drawing, especially if you're on site and you don't have your ruler, or you just want to kind of experience living on the edge a little bit. I actually generally prefer this to pulling out the ruler most of the time. And while this doesn't exactly work for diagonal lines, it can be a great option in a pinch, especially because for architecture, you really want to make sure those strong verticals are perfectly straight. For hack number 2, we're going to talk about working with a perfect mirror image. So I've been doing a lot of still lifes lately, and that involves a lot of vases and fun, interesting shapes, but they are perfectly symmetrical. So how do we translate that in our art? Well, I have one simple trick that'll help you with this. So let's say you have half of your vase drawn out and you're really happy with it overall. It's looking to scale, it's the right shape, but you've struggled with the other side in the past. You can do a little hack where you're kind of measuring side to side, kind of going with the center and trying to kind of find these bullet points. I find that can be helpful, but if you're struggling to get things to be symmetrical, there's actually a way you can trick your brain into doing this. First, you're going to find your starting place for your pencil for the other side. Then you're going to take the finger on your non-dominant hand and you're going to slowly trace over the line that you're creating while still moving your pencil. So you need to be aware enough to know that you're also moving your pencil, but you want to focus on that finger that is tracing that line. And if you do this very carefully, very slowly, and you are focusing on that other finger, you will slowly draw, without even having to think about it, a perfectly symmetrical piece. Now, if you struggle with this, you can see just now I started to focus again on the pencil and my line got kind of wonky. So it does take some practice. It does take some trusting the process, which is challenging. I've done this before. I've seen how it works. I've felt how it works, and I still struggled with it a little bit. But you can get so close to a symmetrical piece if you're able to kind of work on this craft, hone this craft. Again, I recommend practicing on a scrap piece of paper just to kind of warm your brain up so that everything is communicating well and it doesn't feel quite so uncomfortable. But I think it's a great place to start. Even if there are some irregularities in it, they're usually pretty easy to fix and pretty obvious after you've done this process because most of it is actually quite spot on. For hack number 3, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, proportions. Now, this is something I'm asked about all the time, and I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is. All we're going to do is use our pencil as a ruler. So you can see I've lined it up with the edge of the house on that right-hand side, and I now have the measurement of where the house should land. And I can do this with more than just kind of the length of the side. I can do this for the distance in between different objects. I can do this for individual objects. How high or how long should they be? What angle should they be at? You can always use just what you're already drawing with, what's already in your hand, as a way to kind of measure those proportions. This doesn't just work with houses though. You can also use it with still lifes or figures. Measuring the size of things. Is the eye on the right hand side the same as the eye on the left hand side? Are they supposed to be? And different things like that. If you're working with a smaller photo and you're trying to enlarge it, do you double the size of it? Stuff like that. So you can do a lot of things with just your pencil to keep your proportion and your scale accurate. Speaking of portraits, one of my favorite ways to use this next hack is with portrait drawing. Now, this only applies to working off of a photograph. It would be a lot more difficult if you have somebody posing for you, but sometimes when you're working with a photograph, especially somebody that you know and love, like my husband here, it can be difficult because you're so close to them, you know them so well that you're not necessarily drawing what you see, and it can be challenging to kind of disconnect from that. You know, are more likely to kind of go into autopilot and try and put things that aren't necessarily there in. So one of the things you can do is actually turn it upside down. This works for other things too, but I just have found that when I get stuck, I use it a lot for portraiture. And this helps our brains to disconnect. So we're not like, oh, this is a hand and what I think a hand should look like. This is what the eye should look like. You just can disconnect. Again, your brain just kind of gets out of your way and you're able to focus on, okay, these are shapes. How are these shapes supposed to, interact together? Is this actually more triangular or is it, oh, it's just really more rectangular and things like that. It's amazing how when our brains get out of the way, we're able to just connect a little bit more with our hands and with our eyes and just draw what we see. So it's kind of an odd one and a little bit tricky to use if you're, posing with somebody, but it can be really helpful, if not for your final piece as a warm-up, just to help your brain to disconnect from trying to just draw your formula that you've already kind of made up in your head. Now, these next couple of tips have to do specifically with shading with pencil. So I really love to shade with pencil, and one of my favorite ways to get a nice smooth blend is actually to use a paintbrush. So I like to use a kind of flat edge paintbrush like this. Some people like to use a very fluffy paintbrush. The type of brush doesn't matter so much as the technique, but especially for midtones, it can be a great way to get started. Now, instead of just going in like I tend to do, where I am kind of going over the graphite, you can kind of make your own, almost like making your own paint. You can do this a couple of different ways. One way is to just take your regular pencil shavings. I do tend to find this to be kind of chunky, but you can, just by tapping your brush in there, you can get some of the graphite, especially if you're using a softer pencil like a B or a 2B, that can be a good option. But I actually prefer to use a sandpaper block like this one, and I'm just rubbing the graphite onto it. Again, a softer pencil usually works a little bit better because you're going to get a lot of pigment off. You can even use charcoal. So you'll get a lot of that graphite kind of broken up in there and it'll be nice and soft, and so it will easily transfer onto your paper. And I've just found that this gets the best result overall, and it can be a really fun way to kind of explore with the idea of blending, drawing, and painting together to get those nice smooth blends. For our next hack, we're going to explore creating texture using an eraser. So this is a kneaded eraser, and I'm just going to carefully carve out the repetitive shapes of this texture. You can use a kneaded eraser like I'm using here, where you can kind of carve it into different shapes, or you can use a eraser pencil like this Mono Zero that I love. This picks up a little bit more, and at certain times you can be more precise. It just really depends on what you're going for, but you can get a lot of really good texture in here. Now, one of the struggles with texture is that, especially if you're using an eraser like this situation, it can be a little bit too stark in some instances. So you would just go back over that area with either the paintbrush, like we talked about in the last hack, or you can use a pencil in order to just soften those edges, and that will give you a very soft but realistic texture. This is actually a very common technique used for getting like skin texture for photorealism, just a way to get some of those imperfections or just some of the differentiation in the surface, but softening it. So we're carving it out using, our eraser and kind of working in the negative in that sense, but softening everything by going over with another layer. Now, let's say you've been working on your beautiful shaded pencil piece and you start to notice some mystery smudges. Well, unfortunately, it's probably from your hand. It's super common to get graphite smudged onto your dominant hand while you're drawing. So a couple of things that you can do to prevent this is either place down a tissue. This is just a facial tissue. You can use bath tissue or paper towel and allow that to come in between the graphite and yourself. You do want to pick it up instead of rubbing it on the paper, or else it'll smudge anyway. But this is kind of my favorite way, and I use this all the time. Another thing you can do is you can get some gloves. So I've actually been doing this a lot with my oil pastel pieces just to avoid any smudging, and it helps keep the work surface clean. Another technique that I actually use a lot is to place my arm down and then use my pinky kind of like a kickstand, where I've placed it down and I'm pivoting it in order to be able to reach the area that I want to draw. Again, sounds really uncomfortable. It's not great for like a long-term process, but for touching up elements and kind of working in different areas, it's not too bad. But another popular one, very inspired by painters, is to use a stick, or in this case, a paintbrush, as again, kind of a kickstand where it's just your hand is resting on it and it's just keeping you just above your paper. And so you're not smudging across everything. And you just kind of carefully move as you are moving around your paper. I don't use this one as much unless I am painting, or maybe when I start working with larger oil pastel pieces, I'll use it, but it's actually surprisingly comfortable. All right, hack number 8 also has to do with hand placement and working with shading specifically, but it can kind of go across the board. But where you place your hand on your pencil actually dictates a lot about the type of line that you're going to place down. So as I'm drawing here, as I'm shading in these petals, you can see that my fingers are pretty far back on the pencil. I am not close to the lead right now. By going farther back on the pencil, I have a little bit less control on the tip. I can't press down quite as hard. So automatically my lines are going to be a lot softer and a lot just more gentle and a little bit more delicate. Now on the reverse side, if I want to put a little bit more pressure down and have a little bit more control on the depth that I can get, I want to move my hand closer to the tip of my pencil. That gives me a lot more power and a lot more pressure that I'm able to put down. Now, a lot of times when I'm drawing, and if you watch some of my full shading videos, I'll have one of those linked up below. I try to like mention that I'm moving back and forth, but you'll see me do it a lot where I'm, choking up on my pencil to get a little bit darker, to get a little bit more detail in, or I'm moving back in order to automatically soften my lines. That's just a quick trick that will help you to automatically shift back and forth between the types of lines that you're placing down. This is also how I'm able to get a lot of different variety in value while using just a single pencil. A lot of times artists are encouraged to, and even I would say, it's good to have different pencil leads on hand in order to get different depth. But you can actually do this with a single pencil to a certain degree, just by varying the line weight overall. And our final drawing hack for today has to do with finishing well. Now, often we get way too close to our art, and there's a point where you kind of can't see what's wrong with it anymore. So I found that there are a couple of different things that I can do to kind of get a fresh perspective and see things that I'm just not seeing anymore. One is grabbing your phone and taking a picture of it. For some reason, there are times when I'm just looking through my phone and I suddenly see something that was right in front of my face, but I totally didn't notice it before. There's just something about stepping away from it, seeing it at a different angle. Maybe it's going to post it on social media that just suddenly makes me realize what's wrong with it. But another great option is actually looking in a mirror. So here I'm obviously using my camera, but seeing the image mirrored, suddenly things become way more obvious. You can see what's wrong with it. You can see how things may be lopsided. There's just something about seeing it in a mirror image or just in a slightly different perspective that really brings a lot of clarity. So I recommend doing this if you are working on a larger piece, especially over an extended period of time. Now, if you made it this far, go ahead and leave a flower emoji in the comment section down below. And while you're there, let me know which of these tips was your favorite or that you found the most helpful. I'd also love to hear if you have any game-changing drawing hacks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure that you subscribe for more future full drawing tutorials and hack lists like this. And until next time, happy drawing!